Hello, second grade. Hope you enjoyed your nice long weekend. Today in science, we're going to be talking about ecosystems. And so, what is an ecosystem? So, an ecosystem is a community or a group of organisms, which means living things, and their environment. So, that means where they live and how they interact with each other. So, the living things are plants and animals, and they interact with the non-living things like the soil and the water and the air and the weather. So just all the things in an area that are interacting with each other. So I just have some examples here to show you some different types of ecosystems. So here we have a picture of a lake. And so within that lake, all of the plants and the animals that are living in and near the lake are part of the same ecosystem. So that means all the things that you think of, maybe the fish that live inside the lake, the frogs that live near the lake, the animals that live in the trees, all the things that live in the water, the plants, the lily pads, all those things are interacting together to make one ecosystem. Here we have, you might wonder what that is. It's a dead tree stump. So anything that is living inside of that dead tree stump, or plants that are growing on top of the dead tree stump, or the dead leaves that are nearby it, they are all part of the same ecosystem. So that's a smaller ecosystem here because we're just talking about that tree stump, whereas this would be a larger one. We're talking about that lake. And here we have a desert ecosystem. So all the plants that are living and the animals, of course, living in this desert are part of the same ecosystem. So as you can see, ecosystems can be many sizes. So you can talk about an ecosystem that is as small as just one plant, or even smaller if you went with a smaller plant. But this is one cactus that lives in the desert. And all of the animals, and you'd be amazed at how many animals might make this as part of their home. And the organisms that live within this plant are one ecosystem. Whereas you also can call this ocean, which, as you know, is very, very large. That's the Pacific Ocean. All the things that live in the ocean, the fish, the whales, the sharks, the jellyfish, the algae that live on the top of the water, the seaweed that lives at the bottom, they're all part of that same ecosystem. So they can be small or big. When you talk about an ecosystem, they're made up of living things and non-living things. So the living things are, for example, the plants and animals that are alive. And then non-living things would be, again, the air and the sun and the soil that aren't necessarily alive, but interact with the plants and animals to make up that ecosystem. So when we're talking about a living thing, they can be classified as either a producer or a consumer. So I have those words in bold print. And as you know, as a text feature, that means those are words you should know and learn what they mean. So here's our definitions. When you're talking about a producer, this would be a plant, and it can make, or another word for make is produce. It produces its own food. See how they call that a producer? Because it produces its own food. And that is the same word. It means makes. By taking in the sunlight, and within the sunlight, you turn it into its own energy. So producers are plants, and they produce their own food. So they don't need anything to survive but that, as we've already talked about plants and their needs, they can make their own food and take the sun and turn it into its own energy. So a consumer cannot make its own food. So you think about that word consume. Well, when you consume, sometimes we say we consume food. A consumer can't make its own food. So guess what? They consume the producers. So the producers make their own food, and the consumers consume the producers. So they might have to let's slow down. A consumer can't make its own food, so they have to find food and eat it to produce energy. Now, as you all know, I know you guys have a lot of background information on animals. Some animals eat plants, and so they just eat the producers. But other animals, such as the bear, will eat some plants but also eat animals. So that brings us to our next slide, which are talking about herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. So we have 3 different types of consumers. If you're a consumer who is an herbivore, that means that you only eat the plants, which remember are called a producer. So a giraffe would be an example of an herbivore because they're only eating those leaves that are the trees. They're eating the producers or the plants. If you're an omnivore, that means that you eat both the producers, which are the plants, and other consumers, which means other animals. So a bear likes to eat berries, but as well likes to eat meat. So that would be an example of an omnivore because it eats both producers and consumers. And then lastly, we have a carnivore, which eats only other consumers. So Mr. Cheetah over here would be an example of that because he is just solely a carnivore. He is a meat eater. So the last 3 slides, which are another color from the rest of our slides within the slideshow, are here. And what I want you to do is sort these plants and animals into producers or consumers. So what you're going to do, I'll just give an example. So a blue jay is a bird, and he's an animal, and so he can't make his own food. So he would be an example of a consumer. So take his picture and drag it over to the correct column. Okay, I did that one for you. So that's all you're going to do. There are a total of 9 pictures that you need to sort into the correct column. You can leave their name there. Just so I have a way to cross-check there. So picture sort, but leave the words there. Okay, and you're going to do that on every slide. So we have, let's go over the animals real quick, or in the plants. We have blue jay. Here is some seaweed that lives underwater. Here is some poison ivy. A pufferfish. This is a raspberry bush. This is a seal. And on the last slide, we have Mr. Cheetah again, a lovely tree, and a group of ants. So you're going to sort all of those items into producers or consumers. Okay, and then as we move on into the rest of the week, we will be continuing to talk about ecosystems. So I hope you enjoyed the sort. Have fun, and I'll see you again